so in this next little phase of work here, we're going to go ahead and start putting in the manifolds on both sides, the cross member right here that has a riser for the carburetor, and we're also going to put the breather in that is the mount for the alternator. Once we have all those pieces in, then we can put the fan shroud on, because that's where the alternator is mounted, and then everything will look a little bit more familiar and we can start moving forward from there. But before we get to that, earlier in the video I talked about these ports being open and exposed. Where is that? You can see. Whoops. These ports right here, open and exposed. I had them covered with paper towels and whatnot just to keep them all cleaned up while we were doing the cleanup in this area. But just to double check to make sure nothing had fallen into there, I went ahead and ran my borescope through there. Here, let me show you the video of how that looks. So before we get things moving in here, you need to discern which cables you're going to keep and which cables that you're not going to keep. So pretty much anything that comes from the left side of the engine bay, you're going to keep. They connect to the distributor, the heat sensor, and pretty much anything that was standard for the standard ignition. This is a regular coil ignition. And so that comes from the left side. On the right side, there was a lot of the controls and sensors for the fuel injection. I've go ahead and bundled that up. There's one cable here. This is the tachometer cable that comes off of, and this right here is the cable for the light, for the license plate light. So once you get those all managed, then you should be good to go. There was also a number of air pipes and tubes through here that were going to some emissions controls. And this right here is the fuel regulator, and this has a vacuum line right here. This becomes pretty much inert. Once you go to the carburetor, we're going to replace the fuel pump, so it'll be at a different pounds per square inch. It'll be a different pressure, and the fuel will be controlled by the float on the carburetor as opposed to this fuel pressure regulator. So you really don't have to mess with that, but you do probably need to run the vacuum just because that does still connect to the gas tank on the top. It's the return line to the gas tank, and so you want that to be vented, and we'll vent that into the carb so that we don't have any kind of vapor problems. All right, so let's go ahead and have a look at the parts that we're going to be putting in here and some of the differences between the original and the new parts. All right, so this is the next little batch of parts that we're going to be putting in here. These little manifold pipes, this is the cross member, and this is the riser that goes to the carburetor, and a couple of boots that go on the ends that join them together. Now, when you're looking at the ends of these manifolds, you can see the thickness right here, right? That's quite a bit different than the thickness from the originals. The originals had sort of a phenolic gasket that went on the end, and you can see that adds up to about the same thickness, right? So we're not going to put this phenolic gasket on to onto the new ones. The idea behind a phenolic gasket is it dissipates heat. And in the case of the fuel injection, here you got your injectors right here, and you don't want to build heat in the place where the fuel is being dispersed. Fuel will burn better if it can get more oxygen, and the air can hold more oxygen if it's cooler. And so if you have an air-cooled engine, or any engine for that matter, and your carburetor or your mixture is too close to the heat source, you'll get all kinds of problems with clean burn and whatnot. So that's why they had this phenolic gasket in here. In the case of the carburetor, the heat doesn't need to be dissipated because the carburetor is so far away from the heat source. So it's got to come all the way up this and then come across here and get across here. There's so many things that are going to dissipate the heat. So you don't have to worry about a phenolic gasket. And the kit comes with some intake gaskets that we're going to put in its place. The other thing to consider is the thickness. If you had put the phenolic gasket on here, look how much thicker that becomes. That's you won't have any room to put a nut on there. The studs won't be long enough. So we're not going to use these phenolic gaskets on that install. So this all kind of happens in a sequence so that you can get things in order to get them to where one goes in front of another and that kind of thing. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to install these manifold pipes and connect them to the cross member, and I'll show you in a minute where that cross member gets connected. All right, in my last video was talking about these studs, and when you this one stud is taller than the rest, and this is actually a replacement stud. It's actually not much taller when you look at it. It's just got a little fixture for tightening it in there. But what happened here was when you put the riser in, it needs to go on this piece of a stud right here. But when you look at these old studs, you can see they're barely long enough just to take a nut. So what I did was I took the long stud that was in here, and I pulled this one out, and I put the long one in here. So now I have more room for the riser to go in here and still have a nut on there. So take the long stud out of this oil filler, the breather here, and move it over to this post right here, because that's where the riser is going to be connected. Now, you might get lucky enough to be able to pull these studs out with no problem. I had to use heat on this one, and I got it out. Or on the tall one, there was enough space down here to grab onto with a vice grip. But on this one, it didn't want to come out at all. I tried a couple of different tricks, but eventually I had to use heat to get it out. But you can see I pretty well mangled it. There's no way I could reuse that. That's why I went ahead and bought a new stud for this. Now let me go ahead and grab so you can see what size stud that was. Well, they don't sell packets of one, but you can see these are. I can see what size it was. Anyway, I'll look it up, put it in the description. But you'll probably need to buy some studs. These are not too expensive. They come in a batch. It was just a couple of bucks. So again, shuffle those studs around. Put the long one here and the short one there, and everything will be hunky-dory. All right, so I've got this one installed. I'm going to go ahead and load the riser in loose so that I can make sure that when I connect the second intake manifold, the pipes will meet up and everything will be fine, and I don't have to worry about it being static and not being put in there. Now, sometimes when you get these kits, depending on the type of engine that you have or whatever your exhaust configuration is, you may need to adjust the cross pipe, and you can cut that short. It will slide into these slots in here, but you're going to put a rubber boot over the outside to join them. So it's not super critical. But I'm just going to put the riser in after I put this one in. I'm going to put the riser, and then I'm going to put the last one in because I'll be able to slide it in from the end. Moving forward. All right, so I got this one in. I'm trying to put the riser in, and I'm realizing that this new stud with the little connector for tightening it makes it just a little bit too close to the edge here. So instead of putting the other riser and then putting the oil cooler in, I'm gonna go ahead and install the oil filler, the breather here. I'm gonna install that now, and then we'll put the other end in. So that way I can move this around before it gets bolted in. And you know, when you move this, that moves over there. And once you get that manifold in there, you won't be able to do that anymore. So I'm gonna go ahead and put that in. The original had a paper gasket underneath the vent, and the kit does not come with a paper gasket. So I'm going to use a little bit of gasket maker, some ultra black silicone sealant. We'll put that underneath there, and then the kit does come. Oops. The kit does come with a new vent, so you know the old vent gets a little bent when you take it out. So we'll put this new vent on, and then we'll go ahead and install this this riser. It kind of goes like that. All right, so moving on. All right, so there's the vent in place. There is an up to this, and there's a orientation up or down. You need the vents going upward. I've got the super black up underneath there, a little silicone sealer. You can see there's a ridge right here that's compressible. When you put the oil filler on there, that will compress that ridge, but I'm still going to run some silicone around this edge too. This is an opportunity to prevent any oil leaking. Anytime you get the chance to throw some more silicone on in there, you know, as long as it's not getting into the gunk or any of the works, always try to prevent your oil leaks. So I'm going to throw just a little more silicone around this. I'm not going to trust that that compressible ridge, and then we'll get that oil riser on. All right, there you go. Everything's all installed. Now I need to put hose clamps on these rubber boots, but you can see as it is, this moves back and forth and back, and you can make adjustments at this point. Very subtle adjustments, but the actual pipe is actually inside these little manifolds. So these boots are just for sealing the airflow. The kit comes with both small and large hose clamps. So I'm going to go ahead and put those on, and then we'll get ready to put the fan shroud back on. All right, so quick observation. You can tighten this one, but leave this one loose. And then with this able to slide a little bit, you need to tighten this nut because the whole thing will need to move otherwise. If you don't, then this will get all scrunched up and deformed. So leave this one loose while you're tightening this, and it will allow the whole unit to move that direction. And just leave that one for last. You're gonna see it. This one here, leave it for last. So that's just kind of a quick observation that I made. I started tightening this one, and I realized, oh, it's gonna pinch and deform. So I loosened this one and then tightened up this bolt right here first. All right, quick note about these pipe clamps, these hose clamps supplied in the J-Bugs kit. These are some high quality hose clamps. You can see they got a nice thread pattern. The units themselves, these are like a number 6 metric, or you can use a 1/4 inch drive and tighten those up. I don't like using the flat screwdriver. You can just get a lot more speed and not have to cut your fingers on it by using a hex socket on those. It's a 1/4 inch or 6 millimeters. And if you were to compare that with your standard Harbor Freight cheapy hose clamp, you know, these things are terrible. So it's just way better quality. So props to J-Bugs. A nice stainless steel looking. I think they probably are stainless steel. And they have a really good tightening pattern on here. This is a nice hose clamp. All right, moving on. Okay, well, we're all ready to put this fan shroud in. Got everything all cleared away. I've decided to go ahead and just cap off the vacuum and supply lines for the old fuel regulator, pressure regulator. just having this open vacuum line back here would just kind of complicate the vacuum scheme for the carburetor, and I don't want to have to do that. So I just cap those off with some screws and bolts and whatnot, and we'll move on with that. So let's go ahead and throw this this fan shroud in. The thing to consider is you still have to deal with your throttle cable, and you want to make sure that you don't damage this. So you got to go in from the top and slide it down to make room for this. So let's go ahead and throw that in there, and then I'll fish the throttle cable through, and then we'll run the throttle shaft back through. And once you get that throttle shaft through, you want to rejoin it with this little union right here, so they all match up and you don't get any fluid or anything into the throttle cable. One quick little observation here. This is the main fuel line, and it used to go to the there's a fuel rail that went across here, sort of a fitted pipe tube. This is too short to go to where the carburetor will be, so it might be a good opportunity to replace this with a longer hose that will go all the way to the carburetor. I think I'm going to go ahead and take advantage while I have the fan shroud off to replace this tube. Alright, so there you go. I got the fan shroud in, and I'm starting to route the wires. Before we put the carburetor on, because it's going to take up a big bunch of space right here, it's a good idea to start routing your spark plug wires, your coil wires, your charging wires. Make sure everything goes where it's going to go, so it's not going to get in the way of any of the throttle linkage, which will go in here, and the carburetor, which is kind of live right in here. So kind of route stuff through here, back here, and behind over here, and you'll be just fine. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to be putting in the throttle cable through the hole here with its little sheath, and then put the coil back up on here, and then we'll start moving wires, and then we'll mount the carburetor. And then when we get done with that, we'll get up to the front and we'll change the fuel pump. All right, so anyway, progress is moving along, and looks really good. Some tricks with this fan shroud. You know, you have to manipulate the oil cooler tower, but right down here, there's a little 10 millimeter bolt. That 10 millimeter bolt, it's best if you put it halfway in on the fan shroud when you set it in, because it slots into that little groove right there. And you have one on your side. You have one on this side as well. You can see right down there, that little 10 millimeter bolt. Those things slide in. So if you put them in, but you have them halfway out, then once you get them in the slots, then you know everything is all lined up. Then you just tighten them up and off you go. Now, one of the things that's going to change is this strap right here. On the fuel injected tower, it's a half strap. It only goes halfway around. This is a full strap. It goes all the way around this little loop right here. I've elected to put mine so that it's easy to get to, but not in the way. You're not going to see it, but it's just kind of down over here. So however you want to put that, that's probably the best way to put that. On we go to routing the wires. So I've mocked up where the carburetor is going to go, so I can get an idea of whether my cable management is going to work, and I can see right here that it's not. Some of this linkage is going to move pretty close to the alternator. So instead of having the cables go over the top of the alternator, I'm going to run the cables underneath the alternator, and we'll come up along the back side here. And so we're going to get all these cables off the top of the alternator. But the biggest thing that I need to look at is this is where the throttle linkage is, and this is where the throttle cable will come out. That is easily 4 inches off. And there's no way that you're going to want the throttle cable to be that far askew. It needs to be lined up with this in order to get the throttle to work reliably. Now, I can't just drill another hole and reinsert the throttle cable, because right here, where this is, that is exactly where the oil cooler stack is. So I can't just drill a hole. I'll be drilling a hole through the oil cooler. The throttle cable has to come through here. Now, on the fuel injected system, it had this additional linkage that you put on the throttle body that made it offset a little. This offset has a little bar that connects from here to the throttle linkage, right? Well, this even if I use this one, I'd probably only gain about half the distance that I need. So there's a little hole right there. So what I need to do is adapt this. I'm going to use the same type of a situation, but I need to make a new bracket that's going to fit somewhere down here and allow it to be connected in line with that so that we can get our movement with this little lever right here. So we're going to use the same kind of mechanism. Just need to make a custom one. I'll use these components. They'll unscrew just fine. I'll be able to use much of it. I just need this shaft to be a little longer, and I need this bracket to match up with something back here. So we got to do a little hodgepodge work. We'll work on that and break back in. This might be a place where I can stop the video for today and kind of take you know, and a good bold view of where we're at and what the progress is that we're at right now, it's going to be a few days before I can put this together. So let's get this video out and call this part 2, and then part 3 will be the finish up with the customized linkage, and then we'll do the fuel pump as well. All right, that's all I have for today. Make sure you check back. If you haven't already subscribed, make sure that you can subscribe so you can be notified when you get the next version of this project. And we'll get this thing on the road soon enough.